Yeah.
Yeah. Yeah. Oh, hey. Okay, I got. Hello, everyone. I'm here with One Feather again. How you doing today? It's been a
I
while.
am. Yes, it has been a while. And I think, the break every once in a while is good because we can kind of pursue other things and then have something to talk about when we come back together.
Yeah, I got tired of you, so we need to. No, I miss you. No. Yeah.
Well, and I'm not going to let my ego get bruised by that. I've been dumped by a couple of people this week on Facebook, so I'm pretty much over all that stuff.
That's what happens when you get a lot of people watching your videos as you're doing.
Yeah, it's interesting how peckish people are, and then that makes me peckish, and then we got Peter Piper and the whole crew, and it gets weirder and weirder.
And then you got Jack putting a thumb in you. Oh, wait, that's a different one.
Yeah, that's something to
Well,
do with pie, and I like pie actually. I'm a big fan of pie.
yeah. I'm a brownie kind of guy, but or cheesecake. But I
Cheesecake,
like
yeah,
pie. It's all good.
and cheesecake can be quite exciting actually. So.
So what else have you been doing since we
Well,
last?
I've just been dealing with winter here in the Midwest, and we had about a 3 week stretch where it was difficult for the mercury to rise above 10 degrees there. And at night it was plummeting to 10 below on a couple of occasions.
Wow.
And, thinking about the good old days, I spent a number of years up in Alaska. And I happened to have been there when they started
I've been
the
there.
Iditarod races. And that is a race that runs from Anchorage basically up to Nome. It's about 1,000 mile long race.
That's dog sled racing?
It's dog sled racing.
Nice.
And the dogs are amazing. And the mushers are astonishing souls. And I was just thinking about how, A Course in Miracles always reminds us that we are not a body. So if you're, suffering from the cold, then you're identifying with the body, and it gets kind of tedious after a while. I'm like ready to move beyond the winter climb here, but then I think of these guys going nonstop across that Arctic wasteland with a bunch of dogs facing into the wind. And it's
Yeah.
pretty intense.
Yeah. Cold is not something I feel like I got the chills there. Cold is not something that it's not my friend. I do not prefer the cold. It's only snowed a couple times this year so far for us, but when it does, it really snows. But
Yeah.
yeah, in fact, I did holotropic breathing at Choose Again in Costa Rica in 2012, and one of the times I heard a very vivid voice tell me to embrace the cold, and I'm like, okay, no, no, and that was something that I feel like it was just a week or two later that I got into my death experience where I had that transcendent experience, and part of it was because I was willing to embrace the fact that I was cold instead of trying to run from it, and I feel like that kinda started it, and it did with the flashback remind me of the first experience outside of the womb, and, and how I was it's freezing cold, I was pulled out cesarean, and, wasn't prepared for that, and ever since,
Mhm.
let's avoid that traumatic experience, right?
Absolutely. Yeah. It's kind of interesting how um, these imagined events that we have, I was born and I died, those two ideas are what keeps the merry-go-round going around and around and around. And So it's kind of fun to look at that every once in a while in a more detached way, and come to that realization that I never was really born. I became as a result of the divine. And so even though I entered into a world of illusion periodically, the truth is I never left my home. But it gets kind of ziggy at times for us here. We're very vulnerable to all of these different elements that we give power to, and that's really the challenge: is to take our damn power back. Just stop being a victim.
Oh, but it's so fun. This is suffering. You can't do that in the eternal landscape of God. That's the whole point of being here.
Yes, and I think that's probably, that seduction is so prolific throughout our culture. We don't even realize what's going on. We are conditioned from the time we are born to man it up or woman it up, or get your knickers on and just plow on through. And um, there's nothing wrong with that, but the truth is it is a lot of unnecessary work. And so you have to figure out, is it really worth it for me to come back
It's kind of
over and over
interesting.
again?
And we abolished slavery, and yet whips still sell.
Oh yes, yeah, but a lot of those are in motels with those odd signs out front where adult videos 24 hours a day and hot tubs in your own room. So
Yeah, it is interesting that every aspect of the body is some sort of variation of pain. Like even any sensation that you feel has some sort of absence or separation about it in the interpretation. And so you're feeling, even just feeling your hand in something that can be pleasant is more just a lesser degree of pain, because you're putting off that whole infinity, and you actually feel like even the greater amount of pain is just the resistance to that infinity, that eternity that is right on the other side. That's why often people have such tremendous amount of pain that either they let go and have an out of body experience, or quite literally die, as say the physical body, and then enter into that same experience of transcendent love, in which it really truly is and always has been. Pretty
yeah, and
phenomenal.
that's really the bottom line: is, are you willing to entertain the idea of love as opposed to all of the other physical extremes that we set ourselves up for? But that idea of being a victim really has been something I've been working on for the last couple of months here. It comes up a lot. And it's a very important theme because it's so subtle how we allow ourselves to be duped into uh, imagining that we are the victim of a situation or of an individual. And the truth is that there is no victimhood. There is only us as the collective one interacting with each other and creating a drama to stay engaged in the illusion. And
Yeah.
when you really start looking at it that way, it starts getting exciting, because then you realize, hey, I don't have to have a flat tire when I go out and get my car in the morning.
Yeah. Well, that's a pretty extreme one. But yeah, it's like recognizing when you're on a miracle round, as you said, a miracle round. Oh,
Yeah, that was very Freudian. And I like Freudian slips and bras and high heels, but that's another thing altogether.
did you say high heels?
Yeah, Freudian slips and Freudian bras, high heels. Sigmund was a man who had a clear vision of our addiction to our sexuality, and that's one of the underlying themes where we create victimhood. we are the victim of our lover, or
Yeah.
we are going to victimize somebody and take their virginity and run with it, that sort of thing. It's very insidious.
Yeah, I mean, to recognize that you're on the merry-go-round or the roller coaster and then have the ability to get off of it at any time is also it also includes the ability to get back on it at any time. I like to think that, yeah, at any moment you can go to heaven, you can do this salvation thing, and you can forgive the world, transcend the world, and ascend to this higher place. But and also you can come back. It's like having the willingness and the open-mindedness to be able to have that freedom to do anything you want. And it's interesting because we like to think as we're going through this training of A Course in Miracles that there is a right and a wrong, or a yeah, right or wrong way of thinking for one, and thinking that you're in sin and everything. But when you're completely innocent and you discover that, and you recognize that, then there's still only innocence in being right or wrong. And it's this whole transcendent to this knowledge of good and evil, that right or wrong idea that the world has to offer. So you can,
Yes,
yeah, I can be free in heaven, I can be free in hell, I can be free anywhere I want to be. And that's the thing, is like we ask ourselves, well, why doesn't God just wake us up or get us out of this? Well, because you're completely innocent, you're perfectly designed flawlessly, and he completely trusts you and knows exactly what you're doing. So there's nothing to worry about. It's perfectly safe, perfectly okay, right where you are in the truth of who you are.
that's very true, and a very profound perspective for a lot of people. I think a lot of people, even all the various course communities, become obsessed with, oh, we've got to leave all of this behind forever and forever. And that will happen in its own natural way. But the reality is, we still have these attractions, and we still have these desires and these needs that are fundamental to what created this realm. It's there obviously was a part of the collective of God's consciousness that wanted to not so much create an insurrection, but that came to a point where there was a mild rebellion, I guess you could say, in heaven. And that rebellion is something that God, in its wisdom, overlooked. Other than the fact that did a real fast catch-up thing, and put the Holy Spirit within his child, within his offspring,
Yeah.
so that there would always be that line of communication. But the point is to realize that you are on a journey. The journey had a beginning point, it will have an end point. And as you go through these various adventures of exploration in between those 2 points, ultimately the whole issue is self-forgiveness and the forgiveness of others. And that's what restores your divinity. That's what restores you to your innocence, is when you can participate and not set out to harm or damage, but respond to life in whatever necessary way you need to, and then walk out of situations with absolute Teflon effect. Nothing sticks to you. And that's the real point. Our memory is what creates all the anguish.
Yeah, beautifully said. Yeah, I had something good, but I got lost in your talk there.
Oh, sorry.
No,
That's
no,
my
no.
my seductive talk. I do my seductive talk, and people just kind of fall asleep. And then when they do, I grab their wallets and run.
Well, I'm glad we're a time zone apart. Oh, yeah, no, with this, yeah, this rebellion idea. I mean, this is beautiful. It's absolutely true. And it's just like in the story of Jesus, this is actually a regurgitated story from the beginning of all existence, the original 12 rays in which we saw, and being that Christ as the 13th. And that one idea of having one that, was seemingly going against. And this whole sense of the story making that we did have was more of all the variations of God and what are all the possibilities. And as we thought of endless good things and good things, we were in this perspective of pure love, pure good things. So even this idea of having a bad thing or a negative thing was to us a good thing, because we couldn't perceive or see a negative thing, a flaw, or a rebellion as if it was a negative idea until we were it. And then we became this knowledge of good and evil, where now we can perceive, you know, good things, lovely things, and negative things and suffering things based off this perspective of eternal life, or based off this perspective of death, inevitable death. And it's really quite fascinating when you start to discover that the war in heaven of this good and evil has not just been over, but has actually never happened. It's never actually begun. It's pretty
Yeah,
intense.
it is, and that's the amazing thing with the way the dream perpetuates itself and continues to unfold. It is by your willingness that you are participating in it.
Mhm.
So you can't blame
True.
anybody or anything for that descent from that
Yeah.
state of non-self-awareness. The self that you create in this lifetime or a past lifetime or a future lifetime is completely irrelevant. It is a fantasy. And so you don't have to suffer about that or over that. You are not limited to karma unless you embrace karma.
Yeah.
And I think that's what a lot of people don't get. They don't realize that karma is not something that controls them. It controls the belief system that you are aligning yourself with. And as soon as you step out of a belief in karma, which is a belief in good and bad, basically duality, and start to begin to see yourself as a non-dualistic being taking a sojourn through a dualistic uh, illusion, then all of a sudden you have made that first step out of the law of cause and effect. And that's simply what karma is. And then you go to the next level and you discover the law of the mind. Oh, with my mind I can create this and I can create that. And that again has pitfall because it's still anchored very firmly in that realm of duality. I am going to create this good thing. Well, embedded within that, because you are living in a dualistic experience, as you create the good thing, you also create the counter to that good thing. You create the bad thing. So all dualistic thinking is, like
Yeah.
leaping from lily pad to lily pad and hoping you can fulfill yourself or outrun uh, that essence of good and bad. But
Yeah.
even working in the realm of the mind, when you're creating good things, you're also unconsciously creating bad things. So that's where we have to lift ourselves up to that third level. As Jesus says, not I, but the Father within is living my life. I am a conduit. I am this hollow bone that this presence of God flows through. In Native American tradition,
Ah,
hollow bones are being used as a healing conduit. We become the hollow bone that we're holding in our hand as we're waving it over the person who needs healing. And we know that we did not do the healing. The healing came from that source within us. And so as we start to step into being hollow bones, then our life takes on a whole different level of experience.
Yeah, I like that. People ask me when I'm saying all my stuff, I say, like, are you saying you are God? I'm like, no, no, no. I'm not saying I am God. I'm saying God is me.
Right.
And and in fact, I'm not trying to convince you that I'm God. I'm trying to convince you that you are God. And it's all tricky because this whole world's upside down and backwards. And I like that karma idea as far as how you're referring to it. It does involve this thing that we have of memory in this fourth dimensional perspective as far as this consciousness of ego, and that the fact that we can remember that this happened before or not is seems empowering. But it is definitely through this knowledge of good and evil in the same realm of where our consciousness, which knowledge can only be in consciousness, but the body is a representation, or say that all the physical world of this manifestation of the good and evil, say separation, and say all the elements, solid, liquid, gas, and fire and plasma. And the fact that you can even discern is because you're using this knowledge of good and evil. You see it as, instead of as one thing, you see it as many different things, the difference between elements. And so the karma is really a habit of your mind and the way of thinking. And so as much as adhering to a belief system, it's really more of, it's not so much this good karma or this bad karma keeps repeating itself. It's that you keep thinking that this belief system is worthy of you. And we think that we have to adhere to it, opposed to it's been adhering to us. Like it's been uh, going by our standards, going by all our laws and our belief systems. And it is taking that authority again to actually make the decision and the recognition of actually bringing about different manifestations and bringing about a different experience. That quite literally ascension to the world of light and the alternate realities is quite literally this mind changing training program in which you then change your mind from ever believing in knowledge of good and evil, which will only manifest physicality, to opening up to there only being strictly love and peace and good things. So it's a pretty a world transformation type of a course.
That's true. And it becomes then a game of it's like children when they're playing tag. Once we start to tag each other with love and acceptance, I think acceptance is a very key point in forgiveness. If you can't accept the person as they were created in the eye and mind of the divine, then you're never going to be able to actually experience that level of forgiveness of yourself and of them for all the illusionary acts. So as we're bubbling around in these different realms that we have created to explore, uh, and we start to gain the awareness of how we are doing that tag thing, you're it, and then running off and hiding somewhere. It's a game that doesn't give us any rewards. But as soon as we can rise above that, take that first step above that, and when we tag somebody, say, I'm tagging you with divine love, and you're it, you are divine love, then we have opened the escape hatch. We can climb out of the depths of our own depravity, and because of our elemental buoyancy, pull everybody up with us. And that's the exciting thing about the Course in Miracles, is that we're given a format as to how to do that. So it is important that we honor the fact that all of the things that we imagine that we're doing here are contingent upon our willingness to participate in the game of love. And that's where the turning point comes from, is are you playing the game or are you playing the game of love? Because there is a definite distinction between the two.
Yeah, and in that perspective, when we design the world as it is, when we decided what game we're going to play and established the rules in a way, you know, it was only in this perspective of love and there only being love. So as we designed, oh yeah, you know, what if there wasn't love? You know, what if there was a missing possibility? And we had absolutely no idea what we meant by that until we experience it. But and now we have this fear and this pain and this suffering. And so you can kind of hear from what A Course in Miracles calls it as a call for love or an expression of love. And it is that recognition that not only that just that if you have love, but if you are in that perspective of love, you only see the expression of love as you did before that. And if you're in the call for love, you really only see call for loves everywhere and everyone kind of suffering. It's the same thing as the ego. It finds suffering and flaws everywhere, finds only itself. And yet that perspective of spirit and Christ consciousness, it only sees love continuously everywhere. And so it does seem tricky when you're in two worlds at once, you know, and you're actually trying to fit this alternate level truth into dealing with other bodies, you know. It's definitely tricky because you can't. I mean, when you see it all as love, you can't really see the bodies as a sense of having separation between anything. So even just dealing with another body is the fact that you're literally dealing with the knowledge of good and evil. And so something you mentioned earlier about forgiving yourself, and that you really always are working with yourself. It's quite fascinating because as much as you think you're dealing with others and you're working with others, you're always only seeing them the way, in some facet or another, the way you see yourself. And if you find something difficult to accept or difficult to find as a call for, or an expression of love, and you do see it as a call for love, then you see that facet in your mind, that aspect, and you then apply that call for love there, which naturally manifests even as your body moving and the physical world moving to accepting and filling in that say gap where the love seemed to have been missing. And you're recognizing that it's always been there, which is
Yes,
fascinating.
it is. And, again, it depends on where you're at in your specific journey, because
Mhm.
sometimes we get so trapped in these ideas of comprehending and analyzing and equalizing and accepting all these random threads of experience, that we get distracted from the capacity to just stop and to be love. And I think that's really what we're on the verge of right now, is the whole global consciousness is ready to just stop. Yes, we're
I
gonna,
gotta stop in the name of love.
yeah, that was a great song.
Clear my mind. Oh,
Well, but in the midst of that, it is kind of an exciting concept that all of the chaos we're seeing and everything that appears to be leading up to doom and destruction, I think actually is going to force us to come to a place where we do stop and take a break. And that's when we allow the divine to enter into every situation that we're finding to be troublesome.
yeah.
Nothing is fixed by your fixing it. If you are under the impression or of the belief that you can fix something, then you are delusional. And that may sound harsh, but it's simply a fact. The only thing that is fixed by the cessation of the mind, because your mind is constantly generating experience. And imagine if the whole planet for 1/2 of 1 minute, for 30 seconds, stopped thinking, that would clear the slate globally of all of the chaos that we believe that we're experiencing and witnessing. And I think that is absolutely the direction that all of this is going to take us is, you know, like when you're a kid and you're out playing and you're out in a rainstorm and you're stomping around in this little stream that's suddenly swelled up and all the all the forces of nature are swirling around you and you're watching leaves being carried downstream and wondering where they're going to eventually end up. And that's where we're eventually going to end up. We're going to end up at a place where we finally hit the ocean. And the ocean, refuses no river, it refuses no stream. But when you hit the ocean, that's when the leaves stop gushing forward. They just gently float out into this celestial state of being. And I think that's where we're headed globally. I do believe that because we're amping things up, we're ratcheting things up. It's getting more and more chaotic and more shared because we have the means with which to share it. We share all of the horrors of the world on the internet. So if you're a glutton for blood and gore, you can just catch the 6 o'clock news and you're going to have a nice big helping or a nice big helping on your plate of what you're looking for.
A plate to
yes. But ultimately, you can only gorge yourself on this feast for so long, this divine comedy, this divine dinner that we're all eating. And ultimately, it will lead to that place where the stream enters the river enters the sea, and the sea calms everything down. It accepts everything, and it allows love to restore all of these different illusions of fear and horror and misogyny and all of the different themes that are currently going on in this world.
I think about how we've defined ourselves by the shape of the wall we were in, like a river isn't defined. I mean, it is by the water in it, but the fact that it's, not a pond is because of the shape and the hill that it's on. And yeah, once we enter into the ocean, we become this one essence with the ocean, opposed to the fence, the object we made that says, "Oh, I am a river," or "I am a body." It's like a bubble, like a. It's like, "Oh, what am I? Who am I? I forgot who I was," and it's popped, and oh yeah, I'm air. I haven't been a bubble.
Yeah, Winnie the Pooh was always, a good example of that no mind state. Winnie really didn't do a lot of thinking. Eeyore and all the others were the thinkers. But Winnie, when he, encountered the little stream, the river, he didn't have a preconception about it. He just followed it and just went with the flow and allowed it to lead him to a point where, lo and behold, there was a jar of honey waiting for him. I think that's something that we're all ready for is our jar of honey.
Keep your eye on the honey. Right? Yeah.
Yes.
I'm just a little black rain cloud hovering under a honey tree. Get me into Winnie the Pooh.
Yes, Winnie was, well, especially if you pick up Benjamin Hoff's book, The Tao of Pooh, you realize how you, as a child, were being indoctrinated into some very profound Buddhist thoughts. And so Winnie the Pooh, I think, is a very important book for kids.
Tao, and even though it's in the history, but the Tao Te Ching is, and the Tao is not considered Buddhism, but Taoism, but it is in the same kind of genre, definitely. But it's Lao Tzu instead of. I just wanted to clarify that.
Well,
I see some
yeah, All the minutia, yes. Well, we know that Benjamin, though, is a practicing Buddhist and a very sweet soul. That's the nice thing about what he shared with us, his observations about Winnie the Pooh and Piglet, the die of Piglet.
Yeah, he's the worrier.
Yes.
Oh no! Oh no! What are we gonna do? What are we gonna do? Yeah, you could almost see everybody like characteristics in that show or Winnie the Pooh. Kind of been watching it around here a little bit. Got these little ones here. Speaking of, he's almost 10 months old now. I mean, it's
Oh
been a
my
while.
God.
This what was I saying? You can see them as characteristics all within yourself. They're very strong personalities. Say Winnie the Pooh and all this stuff. I don't have it all in my head, the information, but you can definitely start to recognize your personality and how it divides up and splits up, trying to really keep you distracted in some way or another. It's like, oh, if Devin doesn't believe, or say Christ doesn't believe in this world one way or another, I have to offer all these different ideas. Is he hey, what's going to happen? Oh, it's all going to be good. We're all going to be good. Oh, we need to control it. Oh, it's all going to be good. It's all going to be, all these different ways. Oh, you got to have fun. You got to make sure this is fun. And no, no, it's all good. Just going to be good. Oh, I want to be lazy. You can almost see that the seven sins are visible in them, that there's these different ways of avoiding the truth of the nature. And your mind offers all these thoughts, hoping that you're believing one. And if you're here, it's likely that you have been believing a certain type of thoughts and maybe identifying specifically with more characteristics than another, like someone that keeps focusing on the worry. And really it's more like you just believe those thoughts, they keep telling you how to live in the world and how to be a part of this physicality, so you need to adhere to it. And so you can take that. I haven't read the Tao of Pooh, but I always thought it was about something else.
No, Winnie definitely achieved a no mind state in most of his life experiences. He was just there, open and receptive to all of these different adventures that he would be taken on.
Yeah.
So as Christopher would drag him into these different conditions, like with the heffalump and other mysterious and undefined entities out there, it became very obvious that Winnie was just in response mode. He was just in the present. He was never anticipating or worrying about the past, never backtracking and looking over his shoulder. All of his efforts were in the moment. And
Yeah.
that's a beautiful thing to teach your children, to live in this moment, to stop worrying about, you know, I see parents that are always telling their children, well, you remember when this happened and when that happened. And I think kids and especially modern kids, because of all of our technology, I think they do have that remembrance factor embedded there. So you don't have to constantly reinstate that. Get them into the moment now. Don't drag them back to what happened yesterday. Don't fill them with fear of falling off the boat and drowning. You have to give them the assurance that if they do fall off the boat, they can swim. This is not going to be a problem. Stop thrashing around and just float, and then gently start to
Mm.
move, and all of a sudden you're swimming. And then beyond that, as you get a little bit older and a little bit wiser, you rise out of the water and start to fly. And that's what growing up is all about.
Yeah, it's pretty remarkable as far as getting in the experience myself and looking at my 3-year-old here, almost three, and seeing how so much he has learned before he's actually been able to comprehend a communicate with words. He's in fact right here. Hey, you want to say hi? Want to say hi? But probably doesn't.
Uh-oh.
Right there. See? There you are. He's like, oh, getting shy.
Yeah, he's going to wiggle away from you there, but he's growing like crazy. He's becoming a very handsome fellow.
Yeah, it's fascinating how much we learn, as being little, and how much they grasp without even. And it's almost impossible, to teach them, say, of this deeper stuff, and that you can swim, and using that metaphor, and still, you know, protecting their body. It is something, and as far as how I see it, is that they've come to learn limitation, and I came to learn limitation as well. But now, once you learn it, then you want to learn limitlessness and become infinite again. And so it's almost instilled in them. It's innate that once you get a body, you've already, it's that idea of original sin, is that you're already instilled with misunderstanding and confusion of the world. And so you already think of fear and death and suffering and pain just kind of naturally. So even as, I'm trying to tell him to be quiet, and because baby's sleeping and all this stuff, it can easily be misunderstood through that filtration of, say, the original sin. And then he thinks I'm getting mad at them, and even with the stepkids, and there's a lot of them. Why are you so mad? And I'm like, I'm just pointing out a fact here that you need to focus or pay attention. And it's easily misunderstood through that filtration. Like the ego sees only ego, and it really is that, anger sees only anger. And in that same sense, that it's just like a natural condition. But I'm very excited for the day in which, say, my sons do come to the decision that they don't want to be limited anymore, and they might see me as a teacher, maybe not, maybe I don't know. And then I can help them even more so, of taking responsibility and finding that freedom of liberation. That freedom, redundant there. I think you're muted still. So,
Whoops, you're right.
oh,
And that's why I mute myself. I cough every once in a while.
yeah.
But anyway, yeah, that is the joy of being a parent, though, is being able to experience yourself through the eyes of your children and vice versa, and to recognize that all of the things that you are trying to uh, share with them are a part of the journey to their next big awakening. They didn't come into this realm accidentally. That was all pre-programmed in one way or another. And so they sought you out for whatever it was that they needed. And as you're on this journey with them, the important thing is to be present and in the moment, and not try to figure out, well, what was it I agreed to do for them? Just to be love.
Yeah. That's something I think is so great about doing these videos and all this stuff, and the course that I've been working on, is like you make it available almost for a very long time, especially at least another generation. Who knows how the internet's going to go? And just having this stuff out there, and to be able to, even if I move on from, say, the time with my children, before they're ready, then there's all this stuff available. It's all, say, online on YouTube, and it's just amazing to be able to still be there, opposed to, I barely know anything about my grandfather or either of them, and or let alone great grandfather, no idea. Don't even know, did they exist? I'm sure their genetics say they have to be there somewhere. But like to have that idea that you can still have so much information, even awakening your DNA, say, let's something like that.
And, tribal people, Native Americans, and a lot of the African tribal peoples, the Aboriginal peoples, they had an oral based society, oral tradition society. And one of the things that is very important in an oral tradition society is to share the truth, to share the stories with integrity. And so, growing up in that kind of an environment, which I did to a certain degree, I heard stories from my grandmother and my grandfather repeated over and over again about different events and different people that populated my past. And that's a beautiful, beautiful thing. But modern society has lost that desire or that interest. But we are recording everything. So, like you said, there are hundreds, if not thousands, of resources being put into cyberspace, and hopefully they'll be around for a long enough period of time to continue to support this wave of awakening that's going on right now.
It's pretty exciting. It kind of gets into a little bit what I've been doing lately. So about when we stopped talking, I got pretty busy doing this Udemy course of doing the lessons again, but in a very intense fashion. I actually do 6 different segments every single day, including a meditation and an intensive conversation. One attempting to talk about different perceptions of each lesson, as well as additional exercises and ways of making it a deeper fashion, prayer, and even the reading of each lesson. So I've been every day, every morning and night doing these lessons and then dealing with my family and children and everything. And it's been pretty intense around here. I don't know if I even mentioned that to you and talked to you about that yet.
Not at all, but that's fun. It's condensing the journey instead of having all these different aspects that were spread out. You're bringing them together now, and
Yeah, definitely has
so,
different degrees you can get out of it. And, as much as you want to put in it is as much as you're going to get out of it. So it has a lot of layers to it. Pretty intense.
absolutely,
In fact,
and
I'm calling it a Course in Miracles intensive. So it's pretty exciting.
it is, and people can find this where.
Well, you can find it through my website at openandclear.com. That's openandclear.com. Just have to scroll down a little bit. There's a big button. We're actually doing it in a fashion that you can ascend this time. You don't have to wait. We can actually get it. Hopefully, you don't even finish the course and you get going where in the death experience in which I achieved as well. So I'm
Mhm.
guiding people to that same understanding.
Yeah, I remember my first uh, direct experience of the atonement, which is, I think, the same as what you're talking about with the death experience. And it's simply stepping out of your identity, stepping out of your ego. So rather than presenting it in that scary format of let's go have a death experience,
Mhm.
um, it's probably, uh, in my mind, a little bit easier to envision it as an expansion experience because you have defined yourself in such a small way.
Yeah,
Your ego has created such a tiny, tiny you.
yeah,
And imagine arriving at a threshold where your sense of self goes from that tiny you to this explosion in all directions, to the realization that you are part of something so profound and so vast, so immense, and so eternal that you could never, ever again experience fear about letting go of that ego self. And so it really is an opportunity to step into grandeur instead of trying to stumble around in this realm of grandiosity where we get all pumped up and proclaim ourselves to be the master of all space and time. And the truth is, then we catch a cold, and that brings everything down to ground zero again.
Yeah. Yeah, it's pretty fascinating. Yeah, the death experience, I would actually talk about in that same fashion, that the death is of this small idea, and that there is definitely this going into the extensive expanse of all infinity and all eternity. So it's quite the experience. And then to make a decision to come back or not is completely up to, your perspective. I am offering to all my listeners, and I get people that are tuning into this, that, uh, you know, first 30 days, the first 30 lessons, no obligation or anything. And then after that, it's all donation basis only. So you just participate in any way you see fit and what you're comfortable with and think it's worthy of. And so anybody that contacts me, I am willing to work with you and whatever you think is necessary, because I've been doing this for years, talking about all this stuff and giving it out for completely free, and I just I also have to support my family, so that's the only reason that I'm suggesting donations. So, of
Yeah, and again, that's an illusion too,
course.
that you are creating an income. As we step out of the first realm of karma, and then step out of the second realm of mind, and then enter into that third realm of I am, then you realize that it is impossible to have an experience where you don't have absolute total supply. And again, it's that idea that Jesus gave us of uh, how we surrender that tiny self. We experience that mortal death and arrive at a place where we realize I am not God, but God is expressing itself as me.
Yeah,
I am not the one who does the work. The Father within is the one who does the work. And my supply is always at my fingertips. It's never separate from me.
true. I mean, don't misunderstand me as if I'm, suffering or something about this, or having that, not enough or any of that idea. I feel pretty darn freaking abundant. I haven't had to worry about anything for quite some time. It's more of just a simple exchange of an agreement, as much as it is, yeah, it's just really going to support my family. It's not really even money, as there's so many different degrees about all of it, as I do accept work trade kind of thing, and as it's it is what it is, and it's completely just simply, I'm doing what I'm doing. What are you doing? That's good. Let's do it together.
Well, and every time you pay somebody for something, or every time somebody pays you for something, when you're living in that state of awakened awareness, you realize, oh, I'm giving myself this, and I'm taking this from myself. So
Exactly.
there is no separation.
Yeah.
That whole idea of money keeps us under the illusion of separation. Oh, I have to go get money from here, and I have to pay money over here, and all of that's baloney, because all of this is happening inside you. There's only one of us here, and when we completely comprehend that, then all of a sudden we realize that we're not um, soliciting for money, or we're not being attacked for money by others, but we are giving and receiving these
Yeah.
things within the one self.
Yeah, exactly, exactly. And so, like, anytime I'm giving it or I'm receiving it, it really is just the same thing. It's, never left my hands. I remember the first time, that lesson that says, ask what is giving and receiving. And I was given an imagery of my hand holding a ball, and it said, "This is giving, this is receiving." Nothing changed. It was the same thing. And I was just still holding this ball. And it, it really makes absolute sense. So as much as I think I can be going to the bank to pull out some money, going to this to give it to this guy, to and so on and so on, the one that actually sees the reality of it thinks it's no different. Like there's this, chop wood and carry water kind of a thing here. So before enlightenment, I go to the bank, take out money, I give it to this guy, I now paid rent. Uh, in between, on my journey to enlightenment, I think I shouldn't do these things, and money has no value. I live on the street. And then after enlightenment, I go to the bank, I go to pay this guy, I paid rent, I live in a house. You see, it's kind of like the same thing. It's like it's not actually different. Your perception's different, but on that journey in between, that transitional period, we think there's a lot of right and wrong about everything, and there really isn't. I mean, an illusion is an illusion. So regardless if you're doing it or not, it's still an illusion. So you don't have to identify with the fact that it's happening or you need to change it. You just have to recognize your truth about yourself.
Exactly. And the truth about the truth about the expansion of yourself to include every living organism in all of creation.
Yeah.
And that's where it gets really exciting, because then all of a sudden you're participating with people and animals and plants and rocks, and life itself becomes so much more enriched as you start to awaken spiritually.
Yeah.
And you have those moments when you're just driving down the road and all of a sudden you're just deliriously happy for no reason at all. And you're wondering, wow, what the hell was that all about? And
Yeah.
that's the thing that creeps up on you as you continue the journey forward, is you do have these moments of uh, insight where you abandon your fears, you abandon your limitations, you abandon your concerns, and you are lifted up into that state of joy for the sake of joy. It's not contingent on anything. It's merely a welling up, and it's like a bubbling up from the earth, an artesian well that just springs forth and brings forth this refreshing, cool water. And that's what enlightenment really amounts to. It's not becoming, a guru and going out there and converting people. It's simply by the act of living that people around you become invested or involved or um, curious enough to wonder what it is that causes you to have these random experiences of joy. And then all of a sudden they're going, gee, I think I might like some of that too.
Yeah, you definitely don't want to be seeking out a role that's not your design, not in your script. Everybody's, as far as the function, even in this physical reality, is been given to you already. And say that function that given you by God is to experience and to explore all the various options of infinity. So it's endless excitement. And one thing I wouldn't say about this random, spontaneous variations of joy or experience of joy, they're not random at all. They're not spontaneous at all. It's simply a decision, But it does seem like to people, it's like, oh, you're supposed to be upset right now because this situation. And like, oh, okay, I can be joyous being angry. Yeah.
Yeah, I think the anger factor, though, is what keeps people on their hands and knees. And when you can start letting go of the anger, that's when you start getting up and standing up. And you
Well,
know,
anger is a difficult one. When you recognize the frequencies, it is the opposite of compassion. And the frequency is exactly the same. It's just the interpretation, say that of a perspective of experiencing that same sensation of anger is actually the exact same sensation of compassion. And your blood starts flowing in the same way, your face gets red with an amount of compassion in the same way as it does with anger. And so it's more of a, oh, this guy did this to me and I need to go fix it. Or this guy is, it's the difference between the call for love and the expression of love. It's pretty fascinating.
It
I
is.
That is our time. Thank you again, One Feather. I look forward to being able to do this again with you again and again.
Yes, it's going to be fun, and onward and upward.
So
And
it's every other week right now, right?
That's correct.
All right, sounds good.
And
Thank you.
Don't allow yourself to indulge in being a victim.
Yeah. Well, unless you want to. Unless you do it to yourself, then it's not victimhood, right?
Yeah, it is, but it isn't.
Yeah, it's all good. Just playing the game, just playing the game. All right, I'll talk to you next week.
Sounds good. Bye.
Week.